Northern Ireland is full of contradictions. Some of the most beautiful scenery in the world, yet rain almost every day that so often keeps you indoors.
Our new group of friends. Hi friends! Hi friends!
The most friendly, welcoming people you could meet, yet walls and barbed wire fences run through cities in order to keep peace between neighbors.
When I think about Belfast, I think of political murals and barbed wire. It was shocking how much barbed wire was everywhere. But I also think about the positive energy and the optimism that's come out of peace. And I think about my students and how changed they were by their experiences in Northern Ireland.
The Ulster Project teens first came to the U.S. as a break from the Troubles, when Northern Ireland was ripping itself apart with violence between Catholics and Protestants. These days, the teens come to build understanding, peace, and reconciliation within their communities. While in the U.S., the teens engage in community service, discovery, and fellowship. The group is half Protestant and half Catholic, and every Irish teen is paired with an American who can hardly conceive of religion being a barrier to friendship.
May the road always rise to meet you, and the wind always be at your back.
But to these host communities, Northern Ireland seems peaceful. So while they love having kids visit, many people wonder whether the program has much of an impact, whether it's even still needed. But as with many things in Northern Ireland, even a trip to a historical site is marked with political messages. The boat that takes the group to the historical Irish Catholic site bears the British flag, which in Northern Ireland shows Protestant allegiance. The root of the conflict is political. Religious differences are just an easy way to mark the other side. Catholics tend to favor a combined nation of Ireland, Protestants to stay with England, Wales, and Scotland in the United Kingdom.
Before we left for Ireland, right before, I just thought that it was more of like ours. It was a bigotry type thing where the Protestants just saw Catholics as different than them and repressed them because of that. But no, it was this whole political movement, and the Catholics wanted to be completely separate. It was just a lot deeper than what I assumed.
The conflict with England goes back through 800 centuries of invasion, settlement, and struggles. Historical sites in Northern Ireland's town of Enniskillen continue the history lesson. Enniskillen Castle, built by the Irish Maguires and used in fighting against English rule, later became a British fort. Portora Castle, built for security as the Ulster plantation brought in thousands of Protestants to settle Northern Ireland. And stately Castle Cool, its impressive grandeur tells of an earl who spared no expense, as he outfitted a home fit to entertain an English king.
Because the plantation of Ulster established English and Scottish citizens in Northern Ireland, that really put a strong unionist concentration in the Ulster counties in Northern Ireland. You could really see that the plantation did have a lasting effect even today.
The group's first interviews in Enniskillen are with teens from the Ulster Project. The groups are always half Protestant, half Catholic. For many Ulster Project teens, this is the first opportunity to socialize with kids from the other side.
Out of, I believe, 9 schools that were in that town, only one was not segregated by religious backgrounds. I think it was very powerful just for what that represents for that community.
I come from a very small village. It's about 95% Protestant. It's very much divided. There's kind of like a Protestant part and a Catholic part, and we don't really mix. Not out of like a choice, it's just the way it is. I've never really got the opportunity.
Really upset me on how separate they are, because there's this one girl who did the project with me, and she lives right next door to me, and I did not know she existed until we both got on the project, because she's Protestant and I'm Catholic, and we didn't know we existed until we were on it, and we meet up a lot in Monet and we're best friends.
But there's very much a lot of prejudice towards Catholics because there's a massive Protestant majority. It's the way it is, unfortunately, in my village. They've never really met like a group of Catholic people or like become friends with them, so they don't really understand that, I mean, they're just like us. I mean, there's no differences other than their faith, which should really like join us. We're all Christians.
You see it pretty much a day-to-day kind of thing. I often hear Protestants smell, Protestant girls are uglier, or just random things that have nothing to do with it at all, but people, I'm not sure they think it's true, but they say it anyway.
My neighbours were playing like Gaelic football, which would be considered quite like a Catholic sport, so like me and my sister went and played, and like relatives were like, why are you playing that? It's a Catholic sport, and they were sort of told like, don't do that again.
I'm a Roman Catholic here, and I had never been inside a Protestant church before anywhere, and we went to a lot of different services, and I was really interested in it because we went to one service with a female minister, and you know, I had never experienced something like that, and I really enjoyed it.
Well, I'm a Protestant, so it was different going to see the Catholic Mass, which is very similar to the tradition I'm in. The Church of Ireland, it's very, very similar, but there's like slight differences. And then you went to like a Baptist church, or like the denomination that my family was, the Calvary Chapel, and it was so different.
People talk about the pool parties and then going out and helping people, but the time of discovery, it was kind of a surprise to me, and it was probably actually my favourite part of it, because you know, we were discussing things like sectarianism, very much a very key issue in where we live, but we never get to discuss it.
You get to explore opinions more, and you're open to more points of views, and you discover more points of views that you wouldn't have known about before, or why people had these views.
But we had like 5 time of discoveries. We done the main, like the poverty, the racism, sectarianism, and classism. But on our last discovery, we did like personal hurt. Really personal stuff did come up from everyone, and it all kept, but you had all this like weight lifted off your chest.
You really learn a lot, and you meet a lot of people, and then when you come back, it's just this whole new world has kind of opened up with all these people that you can now meet, friends of friends, and yeah, it's really opened up after that.
But now, coming back, I feel more passionately for peace and reconciliation, and just for the leaders. We need to work together. If we can't sort out the past, we're never going to be able to sort out the present.
You know, we did a lot of things in America on world problems. It wasn't always about the division between Catholics and Protestants. We did like poverty and stuff, and they all really interested me, and you know, it kind of affect how I want to do and what I want to be in the future.
As with all Ulster Project communities, Enniskillen was chosen to participate in the program because it was the site of horrific violence during the Troubles. The Troubles is a euphemism for 4 decades of violence between Catholics and Protestants, nationalist and unionist paramilitary groups in which 3,500 people were killed, the majority civilians. One of the final straws to the conflict occurred at Enniskillen during a Remembrance Day parade, marked today by this memorial. The IRA bomb killed 11 people and injured 63 more. Many of the victims were elderly and children. As their tour guide, McLaughlin understood the American difficulty in comprehending this divide. Before coming to the U.S. as an Ulster Project youth in 2001, he had little contact with Protestants himself. Now he's seen the difference the program has made in his own life and community. Hanover student Carly McKay produced his interview.
Enniskillen's always been lucky. After the Enniskillen bombing in 1987, there were a lot of leaders in the community who stepped up and said that that atrocious event wouldn't divide the community. In the years preceding my trip to America on the Ulster Project, you know, the Good Friday Agreement had been signed, so we were in a lot better position than we were back in the 70s and early 80s. But there was still that sort of threat and that undercurrent, which still remains today to a certain extent, that it mightn't take much for us to be dragged back to the dark old days of the Troubles. The organisation, when it was founded, was sponsored by the main 4 churches, so the Catholic Church, the Church of Ireland, the Methodist Church and the Presbyterian Church. And throughout the Ulster Project's life, the churches had a really big input. In Enniskillen, all our clergy are supportive of us. When I came back from Madison in 2001, I always promised myself that I'd become a leader again when I was first able to. It's really made me want to strive and work towards there being better community relations in Northern Ireland, and to provide teenagers with opportunities to socially interact and get to know each other on a cross-community basis. The plan is to build on those relationships. The Ulster Project teenagers are bringing their peers into their friendship group that they formed on the project, and therefore there's loads more cross-community contacts and stuff being made, which is really cool to see. Everybody in Ulster Project is voluntary. There are no paid people on Ulster Project in Northern Ireland.
At Stormont, the Hanover group interviewed Ulster Project alumnus Gavin Robinson, who was elected Lord Mayor of Belfast when he was just 27 years old. Shortly into Robinson's term as mayor, the city faced a crisis that made international headlines when the city council voted to limit the number of days the British flag would fly in front of City Hall. Street protests against the flag's removal escalated into riots, attacks on homes, and death threats. After giving the Hanover students a tour, Robinson talked with Lauren Schultz.
I'm from East Belfast in Northern Ireland. We have a little saying in East Belfast that I'm born, bred, buttered and battered in this part of the city. 95% of people that live in this part of the city would be Protestant and Unionist, so it is predominantly one-sided. And in that sense, growing up, I didn't get the opportunity to mix. Even at a young age, at 15 or 16, it's hugely important. If I hadn't had the opportunity to challenge myself and to have, in a safe context as well, the opportunity for others to challenge me, I wouldn't have smashed some of the myths that were in my head, the perceptions that I had that weren't only negative, but potentially over the course of decades, growing up in my formative years, destructive. When we were in Milwaukee, we just realised how some of the issues that might have been prevalent in Northern Ireland just didn't exist at all. So from somebody from my background, somebody who's now a member of the Orange Order, for example, going to a Catholic church is not the done thing. In Wisconsin, we found a church in Milwaukee which was actually predominantly African American. The community in which I come from got to see something that ordinarily would not have been open to me, but enjoy it. And from that perspective, barriers were just removed. And I guess that was incredibly helpful in that path towards politics. I wanted to make sure I was not only doing the right thing as a civic leader, but I wanted to be seen to go the extra mile. So I wanted to engage with people where ordinarily the people of Belfast would have expected me to have found an excuse to have been doing something else.
We've actually created a whole new dynamic for Belfast out of these historical areas. I think it's interesting when you start to study the Protestant Catholic divide and you start to look at cities across the globe. There are other, whether it's religions or colours or different things that actually start to create divide, and really it's the Protestant Catholic thing that divides in Northern Ireland. But it's not a problem that is purely in Northern Ireland. I think it's a global problem, but it's dressed in different ways.
The divisions in James Ayre's hometown are still evident, even in its name. The Hanover Group's next stop is a city called Londonderry by Protestants, Derry to Catholics. Now sometimes called Stroke City because people use both names in order to avoid offending anyone. Derry, Stroke, Londonderry.
We heard about that, but we hadn't run into anybody yet. Everybody normally just said Derry. And the stranger on the street corrected us and said, "You mean Londonderry."
Because the city was pivotal in Northern Ireland's civil rights movement, the Hanover Group visits to learn about the history of the Troubles and the situation today. The city's geography makes history come to life. 17th century fortress walls completely encircle the old city. The area that for centuries enclosed the government and Protestants who imposed their will on and were harassed in turn by the Catholics in the surrounding area. Cannons still point out of the walls as if ready for another attack. Some Protestant neighborhoods outside of the fortified center maintain their own peace walls, while the Catholic area offers an open-air art gallery as a shrine memorializing lives lost.
Everyone you talk to has a connection to someone who has passed away or been killed due to any of the Troubles, knowing how hard it's been for the people there.
the amount of security that they still need. You know, there's huge 10-foot fences that block anything that gets thrown at them. I did a lot of research on Derry before we went there, and they never really talked about the peace walls. All I read about was the walls that had never been breached, so the stone walls that had been there since Derry was formed.
As they tour the city, the Americans learned that the civil rights struggle in Northern Ireland was inspired by the American civil rights movement of the 1960s. After African Americans in the U.S. protested laws that kept them from voting, having access to housing and jobs, so the Catholics began to protest similar laws in Northern Ireland drawn along religious lines.
Being a person of color on this trip, I was blown away because a lot of times people don't want to talk about subjects like this, and we were right there, like getting, down and dirty, learning about this, people that were involved, or their family was involved, or they grew up with these stories, relating to something else that I can relate to personally.
Countries thousands of miles apart, they all usually have the same issues of human rights. Even here, less known is the Chicano movement, which is the Hispanic culture, the Mexican American culture, which is sometimes not really talked about. So for me, I enjoy learning about other cultures and other struggles.
In the U.S., without Martin Luther King Jr., I really don't know what it would be like nowadays. They kept it peaceful, so if it wouldn't have been peaceful, who knows what it would be like now.
You can almost come to a realization that stuff like that does happen in America. I'm used to getting along with everybody, but there's still segregation as much as we don't want it to be.
But just as Londonderry serves as a history lesson in conflict, it also serves as a testament to peace. The Peace Bridge was constructed in 2011 to connect historically Unionist with nationalist parts of the city.
I think it's supposed to look like two hands shaking.
Even though a lot of people want to fight, there are people who want to find reconciliation, and it really shows a lot of potential.
And from fortified walls to its murals, the visual legacy of conflict has made Londonderry a tourism draw, as has its surrounding landscape.
People have great loyalty.
In one of the Hanover Group's final interviews, they talk with the man who coordinates Ulster Project activities in Northern Ireland. Father John Forsyth meets the Hanover College Group at Clonard Monastery. Although located in a strong nationalist area, peace and reconciliation have become central to the church mission. Father John was interviewed by Hanover student Savannah Walford. He has been working with the Ulster Project for almost 40 years.
I'm overwhelmed with the goodness of the Ulster Project and the generosity of it and the commitment of the American people to it. In Northern Ireland, we would be troubled with many years by perceptions and bigotry, and people rely on what they're told. And that's the worst form of education. To believe something because somebody told you. To believe something because you've experienced yourself and you've analysed it and come to this perception, make it your own truth. That's a far better form of education. There's an awful lot of hope and life in our country, not just because of the Ulster Project, but that's only one part of the big jigsaw puzzle. There's more things we have to do to work together to bring better education, bring better health, bring more employment into our country, rather than just being a tourist trap for people who want to see how people live in conflict, And we want to rise beyond that. In a recent census here, are you British, are you Irish? A lot of people say, well, we're Northern Ireland. And that's people wanting to work together. The Ulster Project takes them off to America for a month. And during that time, they think they're going on a holiday. They come back with a confidence that never leaves them.
Just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on.
And I have seen hundreds and hundreds of young people totally changed by what the Ulster Project does for them. It's not just 62 teenagers making friends with each other. It's those 62 teenagers, and each one of those has a wider family of about 30. So you have literally thousands of people can be affected by the Ulster Project. When they're there, they learn very quickly America is not all 2 cars in a swimming pool. They work in service project, maybe downtown helping the homeless. Once a week they have a very serious retreat lasting 3 or 4 hours where they face into issues like sectarianism in Northern Ireland, yeah, but racism in America as well. And learn and really put into action that we are all God's children. And other things in America, even developing now attitudes towards people of a Muslim background and dismantling prejudice wherever they find it.
We gain a lot from the Ulster Project. Our teenagers gain a lot. But I'm convinced that your teenagers gain just as much. There's a thin line between the politics of America and the politics of Northern Ireland. I think there's a job of work to do in civic society across all developed countries. And I think it's important that we teach our young people, we show them that there are numerous possibilities and there are numerous answers to questions, and there's no one right answer.
Groups like the Ulster Project bring together teens who no longer see each other as the other side, but as close friends.
It's not just peace, it's not just reconciliation, it's both of them together.
Dramatic landscapes draw in flocks of tourists who find Northern Ireland to be not only safe, but breathtaking.
Going to Northern Ireland makes me appreciate my town's role in the Ulster Project even more.
As the Hanover students venture across the narrow bridge, the weather alternates between brilliant sunshine and pouring rain.
Always bring a raincoat.
On the other side, the view is spectacular.